Hi, my name's Mac. I study philosophy and religion at the University of Western Australia, and this episode is brought to you by UWA. I'm recording in one of their group study rooms that I've booked. I thought I'd talk about the books that I'm reading this semester. One of the things as a philosophy student is you've got a lot of books to read, which is a lot of fun, but it can be also quite a bit of work. A lot of the work that I do is actually primarily just literally reading books. I would say that is what takes up at least 50% of my time. A lot of it isn't writing essays just yet. Most of the time those come later. So yeah, I thought I'd talk about what I'm reading this semester in no particular order. Alright, first up on the list is philosophy of science. I'm taking a course in philosophy of science this semester and it's been really good. We're looking at the foundations of the scientific method, and another course that I'm doing is looking at the foundations and implications of evolutionary theory more specifically. One of the books we're reading is Thomas Kuhn's very famous Structure of Scientific Revolutions. This is where Kuhn talks about his theory of the paradigm shift and what he considers to be a historical description of how science works. Kuhn sets himself up to be both agreeing with and disagreeing with Karl Popper's falsificationism. He thinks that all observation is theory-laden, which is quite different to Popper's view of the scientific method. I'm not exactly sure who I resonate with more. I have some misgivings about Popper's own falsification theory, but I don't see any reason that both Kuhn and Popper can't be made to agree with each other. Another unit I am taking this semester is History of Christianity, and it's kind of less of a history unit and more of a philosophy unit in a way. One of the books I've got, which I haven't yet started reading, but I'm very much looking forward to getting into, is Stephen O. Presley's Biblical Theology in the Life of the Early Church. In this, Presley talks about the worship traditions and I guess the more worship-oriented facets of Christianity, which is interesting. If you're Orthodox or perhaps even Catholic, you might find this book to be interesting, and if you're Protestant, it's probably an interesting book to read as well. And if you're just an atheist that's curious about the formation of Christian traditions and specifically worship practices, the development of Christian theology, I'd say this book is a really great pickup. I got it on sale and very much looking forward to getting started on this one. One book that I've already started on is The Story of Christianity by the polymath, theologian, translator, philosopher, you name it, David Bentley Hart's done it, and this is certainly a great book. Very accessible, highly readable, and he covers everything from the Hebrew Bible to the present state of Christianity. And as you can see, I've put little tabs in it, which everyone does on Instagram, because how else would you know that you've actually read the book without the little coloured tabs adhered to the side? Speaking of which, I'll pull open a section that I found really interesting. David Hart covers Paul's conception of the spiritual body, which some people have misread as Paul endorsing a mind-body dualism, and I guess that's true in a trivial sense, but it's not true in the sort of substance metaphysics kind of sense that, Plato or say Descartes might be talking about. And I'll just read you a section from it. When the risen Christ appears to his followers, he both is and is not as they knew him in his earthly ministry. His body has not simply been resuscitated but transformed into a spiritual body, to use the language of St. Paul, at once concrete and yet transcendent of the normal limitations of time and space. He can appear and disappear at will. In Matthew, as the women are returning from the tomb, he suddenly shows himself to them. In Luke, he is suddenly in the midst of his disciples. In John, he enters among them and departs again through locked doors. At the same time, he's not a ghost. As both Luke and John emphasize, he can be touched. He bears palpable wounds. He can even share food with his disciples. And when at last he takes leave of his disciples, he is taken up bodily into heaven. In short, his body has somehow already entered into the transfigured reality of the kingdom of God, and thus, by his resurrection, the kingdom has already invaded historical time. Beautiful, very accessible, very biblically sensible, I think. Next, we've got Kant by Paul Guyer. This is an excellent introduction to Kant, and I liked it so much that I bought the physical copy. I would say highly readable, highly accessible, and he explains Kant's transcendental idealism really well. And it's not the same as Berkeleyan idealism, so I'd be careful of that. Kant definitely, well, at least on Paul Guyer's reading, Kant is a realist about the external world, but perhaps not in the strong scientific sense that other philosophers might be. Bit of a weird pickup. I'm not a Zionist, so just flagging that. But I decided to get Peter Hacker's book, The Hamas Massacre and the Transmutation of Anti-Semitism. I'm reading a few other books on this subject from, other sides of the aisle, because it's an issue I want to understand more about, even if I don't necessarily want to make political stances on it, at least on Instagram. But this book is super interesting, and it's very short, as you can see. It's more of an extended essay, really. And Hacker, being a Jew, looks at anti-Semitism from a Jewish perspective, both in a critical and, I would say, fairly even-handed view of the history. Super interesting book. I'm just a few pages in. Next, back to philosophy of science, we've got the Theory and Reality by Peter Godfrey Smith, an introduction to the philosophy of science. Peter Godfrey Smith covers everyone from Karl Popper to Thomas Kuhn to the logical empiricists. This is a highly readable book, and I'm very pleased that my good professor picked this one out. I wasn't expecting it to be as readable and as accessible as it has been. It's been a fascinating and fantastic read. Back to history of Christianity and theology. I'm also reading the Bible. So far we've covered Paul's letter to the Galatians, which was a super fiery, super abusive, very rhetorically flary read. And I read that in about an hour. It was a lot of fun. And we also read the Gospel of Mark for week one's tutorials. And both were pretty interesting. Mark's got a kind of strangely paced structure, I guess you could say. He's changing subjects all the time. Syntactically, it's not the most sophisticated of the Gospels, but it's, I guess, a diamond in the rough, even though the sort of fine-grained literary structure is, it appears to be a bit sloppy. The overall big picture overview shares some, according to Kirk Essery, it shares some serious similarities with Greek tragedy, particularly the ending. And I won't spoil that one for you. Definitely pick it up and read it. I'm also reading Henry Chadwick's translation of the Confessions by Augustine. I picked this one up off eBay because the translation that I had was Ben O'Rourke's translation, and that might be fine for Augustine for the youth, but I was after a study version of the Confessions, and so this more literal translation is definitely better. It also includes the whole of the Confessions. It doesn't just cut it down to 10 books. So for that reason, I picked this one up. Another book that we've read so far for continental philosophy is the brilliant Beyond Good and Evil by Nietzsche. I haven't got the Kaufman translation, which my professor seems to think is the better one, but this one is potentially a bit more literal from what I've read. And it's also fairly similar to the Kaufman translation, so it's fairly easy to follow. Seriously funny writer, very easy to read. Perhaps it's easier to read than it is to understand, but Nietzsche's strange. He definitely makes clearly identifiable analytic arguments in this, one of them being a serious indictment on Immanuel Kant's philosophy. Yeah, it's an interesting book, and he has a neat little argument against Stoicism, which is super interesting and draws out some internal inconsistencies with Stoicism, such as living according to nature, being incoherent in his view. I'm not sure if I agree with him or disagree with him. I'm definitely not a Stoic, but I'm also not sure if I entirely agree with Nietzsche's arguments. But they're interesting, they're funny, and they're easy to read. It certainly lends itself to being read aloud. Very forceful and strident writer, I guess you could say. There's definitely a confidence in Nietzsche's opinions, and obviously it classically begins with Nietzsche's, shall we say, incel-like, to use a rather unforgiving neologism. In the preface he says, "Supposing truth to be a woman, what? Is the suspicion not well founded that all philosophers, when they have been dogmatists, have had little understanding of women? That the gruesome earnestness, the clumsy importunity, with which they have been hitherto been in habit of approaching truth, have been inept and improper means for winning a wench? Certainly she has not let herself be won, and today every kind of dogmatism stands sad and discouraged, if it continues to stand at all." Alright, so that's pretty much all the books that I'm reading this semester, or at least the ones that are ready to hand, to use Heidegger's phrase. So that's it for this one. Hope it's been helpful, and feel free to tune in if any of this sounds interesting to you, and there might be some forthcoming videos on books like this. Alright,